All right. What's up, everybody? How you doing out there? Welcome to the show. This is last week's fight. My name is Thinker St. James, and as you can tell, I am solo for this episode tonight. My co-host Chase came down with a very serious case of being British, apparently. So I don't know if that's something that someone can recover from, but we're wishing him the best. Little under the weather, dealing with that. So I am solo today. This is the last episode of last week's fights for the year. And because of that, because also we are in the doldrums, the fightless season right now, we've been without events for a little while. I'm just going to go over some somewhat interesting news stories that I've found, talk through some of those, see how everybody's doing out there, get some of your opinions as well. What up, John Dong? How you doing, brother? So, to start it off, we got this pretty big piece of information, I guess I would say, depending on how you look at it. Let's get this up here. So, you may have seen this image going around today. This is the message from whoever the mysterious person is that runs crack streams or meth streams more specifically. I guess he also has a crack streams domain, but crack streams was an original website, an original place to find streams of events less than legally, I would say. And when that went down, the original version of it, meth streams popped up. And that was, for many people, a go-to source for anybody who is looking for MMA content, most specifically UFC, but other MMA stuff as well. I mean, they would show Bellator and PFL events. You could see things like One Championship and Karate Combat, Bare Knuckle. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that you could find on meth streams, crack streams, and the like. And this image was going around today. It looks like whoever this person is that runs the domain is taking a break from streaming, they say. Now, I don't know how to really interpret that. A lot of people are saying that that means that the site is completely gone forever. Other people are saying, well, he's saying he's taking a break from it. Maybe he's just taking it down for a little while and coming back later. Um, I mean, either way, for a lot of people, that's pretty big news, right? You know, a lot of people are not paying the exorbitant prices for pay per view events that are being charged, and they're going to these less than reputable websites to get the content. So, depending on how you look at it and how you consume the media, this is a pretty big deal, I would say. So, I mean, there's really not much else to say about it. I guess we can just read through it real quickly. If you're just listening to the podcast, it says, I'll be taking a break from live streaming. Reminder that the only domains in which I operate are methstreams.com and crackstreams.in. You'll most likely end up on sites with similar names. These sites are not owned by me, so proceed with caution. Join the Discord to get the latest news on my return. Happy New Year's, and capital letters thank. And then in parentheses, OGs will know what this means. So, all right. um, I guess based on that last part, the Discord link, which is a link, you could say that he is just temporarily taking the sites down, does plan on bringing them back at some point. There are a lot of places around the internet that mirror these less than reputable streams. And as was mentioned in this post, there are a lot of other sites that use the crack streams, meth streams, root portion of the domain. So that being the first part, and then the extension is the second part, I believe. Anyway, I'm not an expert on that type of thing, but you'll see whatever dot to or dot ru or whatever it is. So there are going to be other places that will be having these, again, less than reputable streams. I don't know anything about this kind of stuff, of course. I make sure to always procure my MMA content legitimately. So This does not affect me in the slightest. However, it does affect a lot of people. And if you look at the side of the screen here, some of these responses, people are already asking for the next best alternative. People are saying pour one out. The post itself that this is actually from, I think, basketball account here. It says, we lost a legend this morning, RIP meth streams. So this also affects a lot of other sports too. This wasn't just for martial arts and combat sports content. It was for sports in general, and I would assume some other types of content. I'm not too sure about that, but either way, kind of big news. And I wanted to lead in with this because it goes into the next story that I wanted to cover. And I think that we might have talked about this on the show before, but this is the non-news really. This isn't really news, but this article from Sportskeeda says UFC reportedly set to follow WWE's Netflix route after $1.5 billion ESPN deal expires. Now, the reason I say that this is not news is because A, these rumors have been going around for quite some time. As far back as I would say, like around April or May, I remember hearing about things like this, or just speculation more, I should say. People saying, well, if the deal goes down, where is UFC going to go? A lot of people are not very happy with ESPN Plus and ESPN in general. They don't think that ESPN really gives a very fair shake to their coverage of MMA content. I think that ESPN does an okay job. ESPN Plus, not so great as a streaming service in general. So there are some issues there. But on the whole, I'm not super negative towards ESPN when it comes to their coverage of MMA. It's certainly less than other sports. I'm sure you're not seeing too many MMA highlights, UFC highlights on Sports Center, if at all. I don't watch much of that kind of stuff, so I wouldn't know that. But I would suspect it's probably a lot less than the other big sports in the country. So that itself is not news. And then also, if you go into this article, the thing I thought was pretty funny about this is that this article is basically just saying that a journalist suggested that UFC might follow this WWE lead in partnering with Netflix. And if you go down to the tweet that they're referencing here, this is from Damon Martin. And it says a lot of industry folks seem to believe Netflix is the leading candidate to land at least part of the UFC's broadcast rights in 2025. It's not really saying much beyond that. Now, I guess we can go to the MMA fighting link that he's referencing here, but as for the actual as for the actual tweet itself, it's just saying that this is a possibility. So, what real good is that? This is basically reporting news, but it's really more reporting speculation, which is what it always has been at this point. So this article that it's referencing is just about Netflix, saying that they learned a lot from the live streaming field after the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight. They better have learned a fuck ton because that viewing experience was atrocious for me and many other people. And I couldn't imagine having to deal with that for any of my UFC content. But in here, it talks a little bit about the WWE deal. Um, doesn't really say anything specifically about the UFC, like an actual deal between them and the UFC, except just to say that as of now, the UFC's deal with ESPN runs through the end of 2025. So there's no telling if Netflix could potentially become a player for the broadcast rights deal, but talks are expected to begin early next year. So that's the real news out of all of this, is that they might be in conversation at some point. Other than that, you really don't get much out of this. So I just thought this is funny, this initial quote unquote reporting from Sportskeeda, because it's just saying that a journalist suggested that this might be a possibility. So why am I talking about reporting that's not actual reporting? Well, I'm curious as to what actually is going to happen. And I think that the big thing I wanted to get across here is that whoever gets the rights to the Netflix, to the UFC deal, rather, whether it's Netflix or anybody else, whoever gets the rights to the broadcasting of UFC's content, I hope that they do not end up going down the route of splitting it over multiple outlets. Because with Raw, I believe, or WWE, I think Raw is one of WWE's properties. With WWE, they have multiple outlets that you have to go to in order to consume the entire catalog of content from the organization. And that really is annoying as fuck. It's already annoying to have regular aired events in fight nights and then have to have an additional premium on pay per views. But to have that and then also have multiple services that you're having to bounce around between would just really suck. And I would not like that. Anakin, how's it going, brother? So I think that the bigger issue here than who exactly is going to be the outlet that gets the rights to the broadcasting is what is the structure going to look like? That's what I'm wanting to know, and is kind of the $1 million question, or the $1.5 billion question in this case. Are we going to have multiple services in order to consume fight nights and pay per views? Are they going to up the number of events per year if there are multiple outlets? I have heard, and I would really like if they have a dedicated service. I think it was one of the TKO Holdings executives was talking about this subject and said they were thinking about possibly going away from the pay-per-view model altogether. I said that if that is the case, that would blow the doors off of this sport entirely, because when it comes to MMA already being somewhat fringe, being very inherently violent compared to other major sports, but still trying to be a major sport in the United States, at least, globally, of course. But when we talk about the United States and the landscape of sports here, you've got the major four being football, baseball, hockey, and basketball. If you want to compete with those types of entities, I don't have to pay extra to watch the Super Bowl. I don't have to pay extra to watch the NBA playoffs. In some instances, you might have to pay extra to watch certain select games throughout the year, but on the whole, you don't have to be bouncing around a whole lot in order to get the content mostly. But I think it's changing a little bit with certain sports. Like I believe the NFL has some events that are aired on um, Amazon, and I think some are on Netflix now. I think I was over at my parents' place not too long ago, and there was a football game being aired on Netflix. So the whole landscape is kind of changing, and it would just be really unfortunate to fragment the UFC's content and then still have pay per views on top of that. I would really like them to go away from the pay per view model, because the pay per view model is a huge barrier to entry. And that circles back to what we started off with the whole going down of meth streams. If you think that one of these streaming sites going down is going to change anything, you've got another thing coming. There are a million of these clandestine streaming outlets out there, and there's always going to be one that's going to take the place of the one that goes down. There is a lot of ad revenue that is generated on these illegal streaming websites. If you've ever been to one, not that I have, of course, but if you have, you would know that they are full of ads, full of pop-ups, um, probably malware, but that's another story altogether. Either way, there is a lot of ad revenue generated, and if you are hosting a site like that in a country that does not regulate their internet as strictly as the United States might, then that's a huge source of revenue. So all you really would have to do is, let's say, pick a country, it doesn't really matter, but for the sake of argument, let's just say Turkmenistan. If you live in Turkmenistan and have a stable internet connection, one purchase of the subscription to ESPN Plus, probably via VPN or however it would have to work. I don't know the logistics of that part, but all you need is access to the event one time and then simulcast that through your website, and you could be generating 10,000% returns on your $80 investment for the one pay-per-view purchase. So I just hope that the UFC understands that you will get a lot more in the big picture if you consolidated all of your content and dropped the price considerably as far as the overall package. You really should go away from the pay-per-view model, but if you're going to stick with it, make them affordable. People cannot afford to watch this sport religiously. The people who watch it at the level that many of us do as fans of the sport are not paying for these pay-per-views because it is outside of the scope of what an average human being can afford at this point. $80 a month is a lot of money. That's somebody's fucking, I mean, at least a portion of their grocery bill, a large portion of their electric bill, that type of thing. So if you either drop the pay-per-views down to an affordable price point or made whatever your all-encompassing platform, whatever you would price that at, whatever that would cost, something that is still within the realm of affordability for the average person in the big picture. Like, I would pay somewhere in the ballpark of like $300 a year if it meant I got everything from the UFC in one spot. If they just made that fight pass, I would be happy with that. If you had it so that it's a monthly installment, but the monthly installments were a little bit more than your average streaming service, I think that that would be okay as well. If you paired with a streaming service and had a premium option within that streaming service, that would be another option if they did go to Netflix. After the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight, I would certainly not like them to, considering how atrocious that experience was for me. But if they did do that and it was stable enough to handle something as large scale as the UFC, I would conceivably purchase a Netflix account and pay the extra 90, 100, 200, $300 a year to get everything and not have to pay a la carte, not have to pay per view, as it were. No pun intended. So the point of all of this is that we've got through the end of this coming year. 2025 is fast approaching, only over a day away, of course. And we've got ESPN Plus through the end of the coming year. After that, it is open field, open season as to what the UFC is going to do. Hopefully, it is not going to be spread so far that it's going to become a hassle, more so than it already is, to follow this sport. Because we were having this discussion in the Discord as well, that if you are a fan of the UFC specifically, let's take a step back. Let's say you're a casual fan. First of all, you're probably catching pay-per-views infrequently, maybe at bars, maybe at friends' houses, maybe the occasional fight night if you know somebody with an ESPN Plus account. But if you're a casual fan, you're really only doing destination viewing, doing appointment viewing for specific fighters, I would say. Maybe some people who are slightly above casual, if there's like a spectrum and there's hardcore and casual, somewhere in that midpoint, maybe there are people who are trying to catch more than just a few here and there. Maybe they're trying to go out of their way to go to a good amount of them, but they're not purchasing a subscription for it. The hardcore fans are purchasing a subscription for ESPN Plus currently, and then having to come out of pocket, for pay-per-views or going to these illegal streaming services. It's the point is that like you're in a position that it's very difficult to just follow the UFC. So if you want to be like a fan of the sport in general, it's even harder on top of that because you have not only the UFC, you've got one championship, you've got PFL Bellator, which also is on ESPN Plus, but also has a pay-per-view model on top of it. You've got Karate Combat now. You've got bare knuckle boxing. You've got all of the other smaller promotions like bare knuckle MMA. You've got KSW. You've got Octagon. You've got all of these other promotions, Cage Warriors, Cage Fury. I mean, like, there's a million that all crop up. You get a lot of that on Fight Pass, but think of all of the touch points that I just mentioned there and where there is a price associated with each of them. That is the issue that I think is at hand here. It's already hard enough to just be a UFC fan. If you are an MMA fan, combat sports fan, God help you if you're a fan of boxing on top of mixed martial arts. That's astronomical at that point. But in the boxing world, there was Turk Al Sheikh or whatever. I believe that's the guy from Turkey who dropped the pay-per-view price to $20 for one of their recent boxing events. Hopefully that was a good move for him as far as people actually purchasing the pay-per-views. I would hope that the UFC would at least at some point try that out and see what the reaction would be from the fan base, because I promise you, there are tons of fans, tons of individuals that would love to just buy it legitimately. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there are a lot of people that it's just a barrier to entry that they would like to be able to cross, but are not shelling out $80 for it. God help them if they raise the pay-per-view price again, which you know the UFC is probably trying to do. In this economy, things keep going up and up and up. So $80 now, possibly $90 next year. I'm not saying that that's confirmed or anything, but it's not out of the question. It's not inconceivable. So you're denying a lot of individual fans of the sport because their whole philosophy is, oh, well, we have the pay-per-view model because people are going to buy the pay-per-views and then watch it with their friends, watch it with multiple people. Bars and restaurants are going to stream it, that kind of thing. It's like, if you want the sport to be as widespread as it possibly could be, you have to consider the individuals. Consider the nerds like myself, like my co-host Chase Parton, who is not with us, that sit there alone watching these events. I sit with the Vitz King watching the events often. You know what I'm saying? That's two people. That's one guy in Chase's case. That's me solo, and if I'm not with Vitz. There are tons of other people out there who are not having huge parties for every pay-per-view. You really think that fucking some random pay-per-view is going to end up getting like a huge watch party for it? Like, I would say that outside of certain regions of the world, like, any of the Russian fighters are not necessarily even drawing huge like crowds of people having parties for these events. Speculation, of course, but I would say that that's probably not too far off. Islam Makhachev probably is not drawing massive amounts of people, at least in the United States, to all get together and watch these events. So if that's the case, then it would behoove them to lower the barrier to entry. It's my thoughts on that, at least. I mean, so all of this, when it comes to the pricing of everything, is just, it's hard to navigate this sport for the average individual. The people that get into it, that's how you can tell fight people as well. The people that like are hardcore fans, like, they're the ones that are bouncing around all over the place looking for the events and having to go backdooring into being able to watch Mike Perry fight in bare knuckle boxing. It's just kind of hard to begin with already, and if the UFC does not alter their model, it will remain hard. If they alter their model in a way that makes it harder, it's only going to be worse for the consumer. And that is why when I talk about the, not necessarily the need, but the desire, and why everybody should be interested in having other options when it comes to organizations at the top levels of this sport, be it PFL or ONE or whoever it may be. The reason that it is important to have competition is because if the UFC is unchecked as the world leader in mixed martial arts. They can do whatever they want. And if they can do whatever they want, the consumer ends up suffering. So we'll see what ends up happening after 2025. But that's the news at this point as to where we stand. We've got ESPN Plus for another year, and then who knows? Anakin says, I am not a fan of Netflix, though it will draw a lot. See, that goes back to what I was saying, though, is it will it draw a lot if they have it the same way as ESPN Plus does? Maybe. I think that it might draw more people to the fight nights, perhaps, but I think that the same amount of people are probably going to be going to the pay-per-views as they would have been. In fact, I would think that a Netflix account would probably make it easier for the clandestine streaming outlets to access and stream the content illegally. So that could backfire as well. Remains to be seen, I guess is the point. But the idea would be that if it's the exact same, if you have Netflix taking over ESPN Plus and having the same model where fight nights are free and pay-per-views are still pay-per-views, does it help, hurt, or otherwise? I mean, it would hurt. It would certainly help Netflix because that would be the only way I'd ever get a Netflix account again after the horrendous experience that was Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. But I mean, I don't know if it would necessarily help or hurt the sport itself. And if they kept pay-per-view prices the exact same, then it really would be somewhat of a lateral move in the bigger picture, I would think. I don't know. Anakin also says WWE is no longer on USA Network, which was around for ages. Oh, okay. So WWE went away from USA Network. So, but you still have to go to multiple outlets in order to watch WWE content. Do you not? I thought that that was still a thing. Like Netflix has certain things and other services have other things. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I thought that that's what it was. I thought that's what I had seen about it. So anyway, either way, regardless of all of that stuff, it's really up in the air as to what is going to happen regarding the UFC's deal after ESPN. I would think that it would be very wise for ESPN to put up a fight to try to keep the UFC because I believe it's one of the most major um, premier sports organizations that it has as its primary outlet. That they air exclusively, I guess I should say. I know for myself that even being a hockey fan, I very rarely get to watch much hockey on there. It is good for that, but if the UFC went away from ESPN Plus, that would instantly nix my subscription there. So, one less sub in that regard. Um yeah, I would think that they should probably try pretty hard to keep the UFC. But it's going to be open season, and we're going to have to see what ends up happening and who makes the best deal. I just hope that whatever the best deal is, it makes it easier, not harder to consume the sport. So that's where we will leave that one. And I also, again, just thought it was very funny that Sportskeeda is reporting on a suggestion. A lot of big money involved in all of this, though. As we were saying at the top of this thing, $1.5 billion was the ESPN deal. A lot of B's in the numbers that are going around. So that is that. Moving on, another story that I thought was kind of interesting was this Conor McGregor boxing Logan Paul in India dealy. Don't know where this came from or why it came about, but all of a sudden recently we saw Conor McGregor and I guess Logan Paul talking about potentially having a boxing match in India. Why is that the case? Who knows? I guess there was speculation that the match had been off, but according to MMA Fighting here, Conor McGregor is certainly acting as if he'll be boxing Logan Paul in India. The UFC superstar who hasn't competed in the octagon in nearly 4 years, people, 4 years without Conor, 4 Conorless years. This fucking guy is going to go over and box Logan Paul exhibition. Um, Conor claimed earlier this month that before he returns to UFC competition, he's actively pursuing an exhibition boxing match against the WWE star, that being Logan Paul, claiming he was in preliminary agreements Ambani, with the Ambani family. I guess the Ambani family have a very large amount of money. That was on December 17th. Uh, or they were saying that on December 17th there was a social media post that seemed to be the end of things. But an unconfirmed report from Fightbook MMA on Sunday says the bout is set to take place at Wankhede Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai, with each fighter expected to make an astronomical $250 million each. Good fucking lord. Crazy amounts of money being thrown around willy-nilly for an exhibition boxing match that means absolutely nothing, and both of them would probably take less than seriously at best. McGregor seemed to almost confirm the report on Twitter, responding with a pair of emojis, one being the India flag and the other being a heart. I don't think that necessarily confirms anything. Now, whether or not this is happening, why is this even in discussion? Well, Conor McGregor, as you might know, recently had a civil lawsuit and was found not criminally liable, but civilly liable in that lawsuit. Had to pay out a large sum of money to an accuser, was accused of some pretty heinous things, lost a lot of sponsorships, a lot of career opportunities from that, perhaps. I think in the big picture, he will still be fine. But Brandon Schaub, who knows where he got his information from, but was saying that he thought that Conor might have blown through a good amount of his money and may be lacking in funds a little bit. I would tend to doubt that unless Conor was a serious, serious idiot with his money. But I can't speculate too much one way or another on that. You never really know what's going on behind the scenes as far as the money situation goes. Either way, $250 million, pretty enticing to both Conor and to Logan. Logan, who already is making money hand over fist with his Prime Energy drink, although I believe that has started to subside. He had that Prime lunch box thing, the Lunchables knockoff that he did with Mr. Beast that apparently was a pretty big disaster. So, I mean, I'm sure that he's doing just fine. And honestly, I would tend to believe that Connor is doing just fine too. But $250 million is indeed, as this tweet says, a mega fight. So, um, well, I mean, whether it happens or not, it's certainly interesting that this is even in discussion, considering that Conor is still under contract to the UFC and Logan Paul is under contract with the WWE. Both of those being TKO Holdings brands, so both of them being under the same umbrella could actually make this somewhat plausible if the UFC is somehow, or if the TKO Holdings brand is involved somehow. I mean, that in and of itself makes this plausible for sure. This Ambani family is apparently extremely wealthy here. Reading down a little farther into this article, the Ambani family, most notably Mukesh Ambani, who has a net worth of over $96 billion. Jesus Christ. Uh, they're throwing out money like, Halloween candy, apparently. So, this could happen, perhaps. Still unconfirmed. I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about this, honestly. It's like I would prefer if Logan Paul would just stay doing like Logan Paul should not be doing boxing in general. You know why? Because Logan Paul is not a good boxer. Logan Paul is a boring boxer. He's not an effective boxer. Saw his fights several times. Saw his fight with Floyd Mayweather. That sucked. Saw his fight with Dylan Dennis, if you can even call that a fight. That sucked. A fight with Conor McGregor, who gives a fuck? An exhibition fight? Like, I don't understand where the value in this is. That's why when I say I don't know what to say about this, it's like not that I couldn't say a bunch of stuff. Sure, I can pull a whole bunch of speculations, theories. Oh, who would win? Who would be the better man in the moment? Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't fucking matter. I don't care at all. Why would anybody care about any of this? I couldn't imagine giving a legitimate fuck about something like this. Yes, the event is set to take place in India. And this Mukesh Ambani is certainly wealthy enough to make that happen. The tweet also did say that it's part of the historic Visit India campaign. So this could be a nice promotional piece in that regard. Of course, Riyadh season has been sponsoring a large number of combat sports events in promotion of Riyadh season. You know, the Visit Riyadh version of that for Saudi Arabia. I I mean, yeah, I guess that it would certainly bring a lot of eyes to the region. That's great. India is notably a country where combat sports have not taken hold 100% just yet. Of course, we know about Pooja Tomar, the first female Indian fighter in the UFC. That was just recently that she fought. So for the first time we ever had an Indian woman in the promotion. Very few male Indian fighters. So, I mean, there's some value to it in that regard in the big picture, I suppose. But as far as this fight itself goes, I think that's the only value to it. Who is really looking forward to that? I mean, like, you know, it's one of those things too, where it's like every time I say, who is actually going to tune into this? Who watches this crap? I end up being the person that watches it. So, egg on my face for all of that anyway, right? So it's like, yeah, are we all going to tune in for this less than stellar bullshit the same way that we all tuned in for Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, knowing how that went after the fact? Probably. It's Conor McGregor, you know, at least you'll get some somewhat halfway decent lead up potentially, even though his trash talk has been pretty trash itself lately in his last outings. So, I mean, at the end of the day, with all of this, it's just, it seems like nonsense. It seems like static, just buzzing in my ear over here that I don't really care much about one way or another. But there is a lot of money involved in it. And if it is something good for the country of India, then so be it, I suppose. I guess we'll finish it off with Jake Paul, who released a tweet about this. What did Jake have to say here? He says, now it all makes sense why Conor McGregor and his management team have been desperately trying to get MVP to negotiate for a fight between us. That's interesting. So they want to have Conor McGregor fight Logan Paul and MVP fight Jake Paul. Hmm. All right. In boxing, I mean, we saw what happened to MVP when he boxed Mike Perry. Apparently, a pretty decent fight, and apparently one that had to go into an extra round, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think I'm remembering that correctly. So, you know, I mean, I guess there's potentially something there, but who even really gives a fuck about that either? These are the combat sports equivalent of celebrity boxing. Like, is it interesting to see someone who is not a boxer go in there and box? Perhaps. But is there any actual substantive value to it? I don't think so. Not to me personally. He goes on to say, as we told them privately, and I'm saying it now publicly, the only way we're going The only way we're willing to explore me versus Connor in a pro boxing slash MMA fight is if Dana White slash UFC are at the table directly to make it clear that they are okay with discussions. Connor is washed, needs the Pauls, Logan by however he wants. So I don't know why. So this is, I guess, a little bit strange. Then he's saying that potentially him boxing Connor was something that had been talked about. I don't know. I don't know what the rest of all of that shit really means, but either way, he's saying that he wants Dana White involved in the discussions. Well, if it's Logan Paul, then of course Dana will definitely be involved in the discussions because both of them are under the TKO umbrella, of course. So I don't know. I really don't have much else to say about this because of how little I care about it. Why won't Jake Paul fight a real boxer? Well, I mean, I think you answered your own question right there, Anakin, saying that Tommy Fury was the only real boxer. Yeah, the only real boxer in his weight and age range, and we saw how that went for him. He is pulling the same trick over and over again. I made the meme myself that it is Charlie Brown with the football. He continuously sets us up. Everybody hopes that this is going to be the time that he gets knocked out by a person who has no business being in a boxing ring. And time again, he wins because he is just, because he is the better fighter based on the circumstances of that specific moment, not in the big picture. You'd have to be either 10 years old or one of the craziest human beings on planet Earth to ever say aloud and mean it that Jake Paul is a better fighter in the grand scheme of things than Mike Tyson was. That does not compute, of course, but fighting Mike Tyson at this stage, at this age that he was at, obviously the outcome makes sense. Same with any of the fights that he has been in with past their prime MMA fighters, boxers, fighting basketball stars. I mean, like, it's all the same shit, and people fall for it hook, line, and sinker over and over again. Logan Paul is even worse, in my opinion, because Logan Paul is not like he's not even entertaining in the match. Like, at least you could say that Jake Paul is somewhat improving as a boxer. He's been in enough boxing bouts at this point that he's getting slightly better. His movement is a little bit better. His punches are a little bit crisper. Perhaps, maybe that's even being generous, but you could say that at least there is some semblance of value there. Logan Paul needs to stay doing his gymnastics over in the WWE. He does not have any place in a boxing ring. This dude is not worth the paper they print the cards on when it comes to boxing. So, him versus Connor in an exhibition match where neither of them are going to give a fuck, they're going to secure $250 million a piece. Why would either of them have any incentive to actually go out there and try? It does not count towards a record. It does not matter in the grand scheme of things if the purse is guaranteed. Logan is made for WWE, but not boxing? Absolutely. 100% correct. Apparently, he's very good in the WWE, from what I have heard. I have heard that he is a very skilled professional wrestler. I guess his cells are very good. He's very athletic in that regard. That's fine. I got no problem with any of that. Stay doing that. You have found your lane. You have found your niche. There is nothing wrong with that. If anything, I would think that that would be a great thing in the broader picture because it legitimizes all of the other bullshit that has surrounded him throughout all of his quote unquote career. You know, the Japanese forest incident is in the rearview mirror if you're making everybody smile when you're jumping around from the top rope. So stay doing that. Stop with this garbage, this absolute malarkey. But if this Mukesh Ambani is shelling out $250 million, then who am I to say anything, right? I mean, obviously, I'm not in the first place, but I don't think anybody's going to be able to tell him otherwise. I think the unfortunate truth of this, and it's never going to happen, but still the truth, is that if we want these dumb spectacle that don't like it's you can't even call them spectacles because they're not like a spectacle denotes some kind of grandeur, some level of eye-catching, attention-grabbing entertainment. These are not that. These are facades of combat sports. But if we want them to stop, the unfortunate truth of it is to not tune in, is to not give our attention to these people or these enterprises. But we're going to. So the cycle perpetuates itself. Anyway, point is, Conor McGregor perhaps fighting Logan Paul in India for a hell of a lot of money. How does that fight go? Blow it out your ass. That's all I mean, how does it go? Who cares? Fucking draw. I guarantee you that neither of them are going to be throwing with any kind of intensity. It's going to be a lot of feet shuffling, a lot of baby jabs. One of them outpoints the other. They both raise their hands at the end of the day. And that's, a funny part about the Logan Paul tweet as well, where he says, Conor is washed, needs the Pauls, Logan by however he wants. Logan by however he wants. Logan could not finish Dylan Dennis. And he actually wanted to finish Dylan Dennis. I would suspect he had incentive to finish Dylan Dennis. All of the amazingly over-the-top things that Dylan Dennis was saying about Logan Paul and more specifically his wife. Things that crossed a line that really probably should not have been crossed. Either way, did not finish that fight. He couldn't finish lunch, let alone a fight. So, I guess that's the end of the story on that one. Logan has the frame but can't box. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a point to that. I guess you could say that, well, he's got size on Conor. Again, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. It's an exhibition fight. It is. This is the WWE version of boxing, I would say, where both guys are getting paid an exorbitant amount of money to go out there and dance around for a little while. They're performatively fighting. It's not actual fighting. It's performance art. Interpretive dance fighting. So, whatever. We'll see if it ends up actually happening or not. Does Conor actually need the money? Maybe. Probably not. Does Logan need the money? Probably not. Would they like the money? Who wouldn't? That's where we'll put an end to that one. All right. Moving on. Something back in the UFC world here. I thought this was kind of interesting for the circumstances surrounding it. Azamat Murzakanov, heavyweight in the UFC, gets a 6-month suspension for his second anti-doping violation. This guy doesn't know when to quit the juice. Oh, he's light heavyweight. My bad. I thought he was heavyweight. Did he not fight at heavyweight at some point? Maybe I'm misremembering that. Azamat Murzakanov, one of the top light heavyweights in the UFC, won't be competing in the first quarter of 2025. CSAD, the combat sports anti-doping agency that the UFC has partnered with, which is basically the UFC's organization. They can say that they're partners, but the UFC runs that organization. They are paired with Drug-Free Sport. I did a lot of research on this subject. If you are so inclined, you can go back and watch the video on the UFC and USADA's breakup. So I'm very familiar with these entities. They announced on Monday that Murzakanov is serving a 6-month suspension after testing positive for LGD 4033 in an out of competition test taken on October the 8th. So Mirzakhanov had already popped. Additionally, this is Mirzakhanov's second anti-doping violation since signing with the UFC. This dude was juicing within the organization. This doubles his suspension from 90 to 180 days. In 2019, USADA, I just mentioned, the previous testing organization that the UFC used to partner with, announced a 2-year suspension for Mirzakhanov stemming from a 2017 violation ahead of his scheduled UFC debut. So this dude really does not know how to get out of his own way when it comes to the PEDs, man. I mean, they're saying here that the pop came from a dietary supplement that Mirzakhanov submitted. It showed a low level presence of 4033, which was not listed as an ingredient on the label. So you could say that this was an unfortunate mistake. Perhaps it'll get overturned. I doubt it. They very rarely overturn these things. And it is always the stance of these testing organizations that you need to know exactly what you are putting into your body. I would tend to agree with that on the most, for the most part, on the whole. I would say that that is pretty much correct. It is unfortunate in situations like this, but more especially unfortunate for a guy like Mirzakhanov, who is now in his second time. But I mean, a 2-year suspension in the first go around, that must have been pretty bad. So yeah, I mean, there's really not too much else to say about it. He is undefeated, which is, it's unfortunate that he's having to be sidelined like this. I remember his last fight being pretty goddamn good for him. I remember noting, I was like, Azamat Mirzakhanov, definitely a name to keep in mind. As Anakin's saying here, yeah, Azamat is a very good fighter too. Sad to see this. Yeah, I guess sometimes it is just the way of it, but I would posit that he's got to be extra careful if he had already popped the first time. And it does not say in this article, but we can go to the other article to see what were the circumstances uh surrounding the first violation. He tested positive for bolder metabolites, banned substances which are classified as anabolic agents, so anabolic steroids. Um, I mean, that would seem to be pretty blatant. That's not a tainted supplement type of deal. Anabolic steroids are outside of the scope of that. So, yeah, not great. Not great indeed. But I guess we're just going to have to hang out and wait and see. Something similar happened to Hamdi, and he's fighting in Saudi versus Pogues. Oh, really? Okay. I mean, that's, maybe there's something going around on that side of the world, you know? A lot of these guys training together, possibly some tainted supplements just in the purview. Or it could have also been that there was a larger amount of the supplement ingested earlier, and then a tainted supplement is a convenient excuse. I have heard that before, that there are certain fighters that will ingest a larger quantity of a banned substance and then get off of it. And if there is any trace amounts of the supplement still in their system, they will have at the ready a supplement that can be passed off as one with trace amounts of that supplement in it to say, look, it wasn't really all that. It's basically a saving face type of measure. I'm not saying that that's what happened in this case. I'm just saying that that is something I have heard before. They take a large amount of something, come back, oh, you popped for a small amount. Well, I have the supplement that I was taking. Maybe it was in that. Comes back with the same supplement, the same agent in it that was what they were initially taking more of. they can at least have some plausible deniability to say, look, I didn't know that it was in there. I've been taking it. You can see that all of my other levels are somewhat similar. When it comes to the other ingredients in the supplement, a lot of times they will mirror the other ingredients in the supplement. It's a really complicated system and going a long roundabout way to get yourself out of a sticky situation, even though you're still in a sticky situation. So it's not the best thing to do, and it seems a hell of a lot more complicated than just fighting clean. But regardless, that probably wasn't the situation with Osmot. Perhaps again, I can't say one way or another, but unfortunate that he is out yet again. The man is all kinds of hot pissing, sadly. And I know that it is somewhat of a shorter one if we end on this, but the last thing that I have for today is Igor Severino making his return to combat sports and leaning in to the Hannibal Lecter gimmick based on his bite of Andre Lima earlier this year. What's up, 46? How you doing, brother? Last movie to make me cry. Also, what a year it's been in the UFC. um, Last movie to make me cry. That's a tough one, man. I'd have to think on that one a little bit. Uh Yeah, get back to me on that one. Let me. I'll hit you on the Discord about that. But yes, it has been a it has been quite a year for the UFC for sure. Certainly wasn't any of the movies that I've seen recently. I saw a couple of movies actually. I don't usually watch a lot of new movies, but there were a couple that I wanted to see, and I've been knocking them off since we've been in the off season here. And not many of them were great, to be perfectly honest. I saw the what was it called? A Complete Unknown. That's the Bob Dylan biopic. Did not like that in the slightest. I saw Joker 2, thought that that was not great, and then saw Nosferatu, and that was good, but not great. So, watching a lot of current movies, none of them really resonating with me. Although I also did watch a documentary on what was it called? Chiefs Maniac? No, Chiefs Fanatic. That's what it's called, I believe. Um, it's a documentary about this dude who robbed banks in order to fund his gambling addiction to bet on the Kansas City Chiefs. It's on Amazon if you're interested in watching that. Did not make me cry though. None of those movies did. Anyway, back to Igor Severino. So Igor Severino is back. He embraces the Hannibal Lecter gimmick in his first fight after the UFC suspension. I mean, it was not, they call it a suspension all that they want. It was a expulsion. He is out of the UFC, but he's back. He's back and he is fighting in Octagon now. Octagon 65. And actually, might have to tip the hand on this one. He won his fight. And I liked this headline, Cage Side Press getting a tip of the hat for the for the play on words, the little the cheeky pun in the headline. Igor Severino gets past Jonas Margard by the skin of his teeth at Octagon 65. Very good. But you can see here, still in the Hannibal Lecter getup. So Igor Severino says, "You can't make me feel bad about biting a guy. I'm going to lean all the way in, Henry Cejudo style. You can't make me feel bad about being cringe. I'm going to be extra cringe," in Henry's case. I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily going to work for him, and I certainly don't think it's going to get him back in the UFC. But this is the case. He was suspended for biting his opponent, Andre Lima, during a UFC fight in March. If you recall, the bite mark was right there on the inside of the bicep. And Andre Lima ended up getting it tattooed on his body in commemoration of the bite itself and also the $50,000 that he got as an additional bonus, also known as the I got fucking bit bonus. All right. you know? So, yeah, coming back in Octagon. Octagon taking place in the Czech Republic, place that Yuri Prohashka is certainly familiar with. I'm fairly certain he fought in Octagon. Um, some people wanted him to be banned altogether from MMA, and his social media was flooded with hateful comments and death threats. Who is threatening death over that? That's so weird to me. Why is death threats just always a thing? Like whenever something happens, it feels like person makes a statement. Oh, I got death threats. This guy bites somebody in an MMA fight. He's getting death threats. Like, why are death threats a thing all the time? It feels like, and in so many circumstances where death threats are not appropriate. The 21-year-old talent whose DQ loss was his first defeat as a professional MMA fighter. What a way to lose your O. He believes that all the publicity is good publicity. Oh, good lord. Yeah, he really is leaning in. Octagon also embraced that, referring to him as a disgraced UFC star when announcing the fight. Damn. I mean, I guess look, I'm kind of getting on his case about it, but it's like, what do you do in a situation like that, right? What do you do? I mean, you either go the contrition route, which I would say would probably have been the smarter way to go, which I think he tried to do. I think he tried to say that it was a bad mistake. It was a big mistake on his part. He was sorry. He was apologizing to Dana. Dana wasn't hearing it. So it's like, look, I mean, if it isn't going to work one way, I guess you got to go another way, right? The bite became viral worldwide, Severino told MMA Fighting. News channels that had nothing to do with MMA were talking about it, so now I'm used to that. I'm using that to my advantage. I have the mask. I'm having some fun, but it's just a joke. That won't happen again. Yeah, I fucking hope not. But if you're watching the stream, you can see, he's here with his Hannibal Lecter mask, and I would very much hope that those are not his actual teeth because those are rather homely. Um, I believe that his opponent, in this other article, it said that his opponent had threw a toothbrush at him at the weigh-ins, or at the face-off at least, and told the Brazilian to brush his teeth, which caused security to separate the pair. So, they did their thing. Apparently, Severino was able to best this opponent, Jonas Margard, Jonas Margard, and got himself a win in Octagon. So glad that it's like, look, it was a dumb mistake. It was a really, really, really dumb mistake, I would say. Does it really need to be career ending? I don't think so, really. I mean, it certainly is something that should have gotten a suspension, like a legitimate suspension. But as far as it being an actual full on career ending incident, I don't think that that should be how this guy goes out. He didn't kill anybody, he didn't assault anybody in a sexual manner. It's not a violent crime as far as what he did. I mean, I guess you could say to a certain extent, there's a little bit of violence to it, but come on. It was just a dumb thing. He's a young kid. He's 21 years old. I say give the kid another shot. So, Octagon, good for them, I guess, being able to pull in a little bit of extra press off of Igor Severino and his bite mark for the ages. And I hope that it was good for Octagon. Hopefully that did get their name out there a little bit more. I'd like to be watching Octagon more. I know that No Chill MMA, friend of the channel, is often watching Octagon on his channel, I believe, or at least I think that I've seen him streaming a watch along of Octagon at some point in the past. So, good deal. If that's something that is worth watching, if they've got good enough fighters and all that, then let them get the press. And good for them to lean into this. If Severino was already leaning into it to begin with. Yeah. So I guess that is really about all of the news that I had to go over here today. I know it's a much shorter podcast than we usually do, of course, without Chase to talk through some of this stuff. It's a real one-sided conversation that you're just getting from me. Um, that's going to be about the deal. But before I let everybody go, since this is the last one of the year, I would say that much like last week, I wanted to thank everybody for the outstanding support that this show, at least when it's both of us, has been receiving. You know, we all appreciate it. Myself and Chase are very grateful to everybody who supports. We have last week's fights shirts that are available from Chase. Chase is making them by hand. The man is industrious. He is an entrepreneur. He is out there pressing these shirts himself. You might have seen myself and Chase wearing them on the last episode. They are pretty cool. We've got new designs that he has been working with as well. We got some new logos made up. So there's a bunch of options as far as supporting the show goes. If you are so inclined, all you have to do is reach out to my buddy Chase at CP Smalls on Instagram or at Creative Partin, Partin, on Twitter, and you can get one of those, show your support for the show. We will be back next Monday. Next Monday will be in next week's fights. We have another week off without fights. This is a long stretch of no fights leading into the first event of the year, which is, of course, Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Hebos. But we will be breaking that event down, going over some of our predictions on the next show. You can keep up with me and all of what I'm doing at Yama Show here on YouTube, also at Yama Show on Twitter and Instagram as well. I will be having a new video coming out soon. I am finishing up the script for it. A little bit more of a serious think piece kind of video, but something that I have been working on for a little while that I'm looking forward to getting out. So, getting that script finished up, we'll get that put together and out as soon as possible. The Conor McGregor omnibus video of all of my streams covering the civil trial is out currently on the channel. Can watch that. Make sure you give that a like if you enjoy any of it. You could probably skip around a good amount since it is 3.5 hours long, but check it out, enjoy it. And yeah, I think that's going to be about it for this week, everybody. Thanks very much for the support. Again, have a great rest of your week. Have a great new year. Enjoy New Year's. Be responsible. Don't get yourself injured or killed. Have fun. And as always, fight on.